Yeah. Yeah, record is started, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. And first of all, before we start on the business of the evening, I'd just like to welcome Richard onto the Standards Committee. Richard, what we're probably going to do is just do a little bit of a round robin so that you just, see who's who and where they sort of fit in with the process. We've got a couple of apologies. But they hopefully will be within the next time we are here. So if I'll make a start then, Richard. Good to have you, Andrew Mitchell. I'm the current chair of the Standards Committee, and I'm on my second term and final term, civil servant by day. So you're welcome.
Hello, Andrew.
John.
Yes, I'm the member for the community councils. I'm the vice chair of Bishton and Underwood Community Council, and I'm a retired power engineer.
Hello, John.
Phil.
Hi, Phil Howring. We haven't met before, Richard, if you recall. I'm the member for St Julian's.
Yes, I do remember, Phil.
Super. Gareth.
Must remember to unmute. Gareth Price, Head of Law and Regulation. I'm the Council's Monitoring Officer, and I advise the Standards Committee on all things ethical standards.
Yeah, and I think we met before, Gareth, didn't we?
I'm sure we have an interview, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Moving on around, Tracy.
Hi, I'm Tracy, and I've been on the committee now for 8 years. I'm leaving as you're joining, so I wish you well. And it's been a very interesting 8 years, and if you are requested to attend any training, one that always sticks out in my mind, which I've attended twice, is the All Wales Conference. So keep your ears open for that one, and welcome, and I wish you well.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you.
Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul Worthington. I'm lay member. I think this is my second or maybe third year, just of a first term, and I'm a health and social care policy researcher working in the Senedd at the moment.
Ah, right.
So there we go. Thank you, Paul. And our two support ladies who do a fantastic. One's going to do a fantastic job, and one has been doing a fantastic job. So Pam, and you probably would have met Pam on the interviews as well.
Yes, and also on the test meeting.
Oh, there we go.
Had a chat to Pam.
Yes, so I'll be doing the minutes today. Thank you, Chair, and then Sam will be taking over from me, and we'll be minuting November's meeting.
Nice to meet you all, finally.
And then Sam, last but not least.
Yes, it's nice to meet you all. It'll be nice to have a good committee to work with.
Thank you.
Okay, so I don't know if I introduce myself.
Yes, please do. I was coming back to you now. Yeah,
I'm a civil servant and a civil engineer. So my day job, I'm head of planning, asset management and standards for the strategic road network in Wales for Welsh Government. So I'm based in Cathays Park normally, but obviously for the last X number of months, I've been working from home. So yeah, I'm really excited to be joining this committee and really looking forward to it. And it's really good to meet you all.
Yeah, thank you for that, Richard. And it's fairly informal. If you want to say something, please do have an input in it. People have different inputs when they think they do or need whatever. So you're very welcome. And without further ado, if we take the agenda first of all. So the first item on the agenda was apologies, and I know Pam's mentioned some informally, but I'm sure she'll mention them formally now.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Wilcox and Mr. Kerry Watkins.
Thank you very much. Item 2 on the agenda is declaration of interests. So, Gareth, can I just let you talk about that? It's only something brief, isn't it, for our interest in the committee and what we might talk about?
Always a standing item on all council agendas, just in case anything comes up that you have to declare an interest in. But I've never known any member of Standards Committee declare an interest, so that's fine.
Okay, thank you. So if we move on to the minutes item 3 on the agenda, the minutes of the previous meeting. And if I just... Okay, so if we just do the, we'll just do it for accuracy first of all. And they start in your bundle on, oh, that's an interesting one. Start in your bundle on page 3. So page 3. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. And finally, the last little bit on page 7. And matters arising from it. So matters arising from page 3. Page 4.
I mean, sorry, on succession planning, I mean, clearly Richard has joined us today.
Yes.
Just to confirm, following the interviews, that Jill Newton was appointed as well, but she won't take up office until Tracy retires in October. So both those appointments were confirmed by council at the AGM in May.
Thank you, Gareth. Yeah, and that's item 6 for us on the on those minutes. So page 5. And then finally, the last little bit of page 6. Okay, so I'm going to have covered on that items 3 and then the matters of arising. And Gareth has pointed out about the appointments and the succession planning on there. So I'm going to cover that as item 4. Item 5 is going to be the chair's announcements. I've not had any, and or I've not got any, and I'm sure if I would have, Gareth would have briefed me on it before we got here.
Yeah.
So nothing on that one, thank you. Complaints, item 6 on the agenda. Anything from yourself, Gareth, or?
Yeah, just a verbal update then on where we are with the current complaints that I mentioned last time.
Yeah.
Since last time, we've had one further complaint referred to the Ombudsman about a city councillor, which he declined to accept for investigation, and referred it back and said it was more of an issue in terms of communication between the two councillors, and if they wanted resolution, it was more a matter for the local resolution protocol. So it's been sent back to the councillor concerned. I've asked her whether she wants to pursue it through that resolution protocol, but I've heard nothing since. So that was one further complaint that the Ombudsman has declined to investigate. There was one outstanding complaint from last time involving a community council. Now, I've had a report through from the Ombudsman on that one. He did find that there was a technical breach of the code. This involved a community council member where they were voting on various grants for local organisations in the community. And he failed to declare for the record that his wife was on the committee of one of the, I think it was the churches or village hall committees that they were awarding a grant to. Now, the Ombudsman concluded that there was a technical breach of the code there, because clearly he should have declared that interest. But he took the view that it wasn't serious enough to warrant any action. So applying the that two-stage test that he applies, yes, he was satisfied there was a breach there because it should have been declared for the sake of openness and transparency, but he did not think it was serious enough to refer it to Standards Committee or impose any sanction. So he'll be writing to the councillor concerned just to reinforce the need for transparency, but no further action will be required on that particular item. He was satisfied that there was no impropriety there. There was no deliberate intention to convey a financial advantage on his wife's committee, and all the other members of the community council voted in favour of the grant anyway. So it didn't influence the final outcome or the decision. So I think those were factors in his decision not to refer the matter any further in terms of the public interest. So that one's been closed off. I think from last time there were 3 other community council complaints which are still outstanding that I've not heard anything about. So I'll let you know next time if I hear anything more about those 3 complaints involving community councils and the clerks. Right.
Can I speak on the complaint, the first one that you talked about? Would it be relevant for me to speak on it as I made the complaint?
Yes, I mean,
don't think. Oh, sorry.
As long as we don't mention any names or go into any confidential details, then yes, that's fine.
It's just that I've spoken to the Ombudsman about it because they obviously sent me a letter, and we're satisfied with with what he's done with the with the letters that he's sent out, and it shouldn't happen again.
Thank you, John. That's excellent. Gareth, I wonder if you could just refresh our memories, and obviously for the benefit of Richard, we're talking about complaints here, why they don't all come to us and why they go to the Ombudsman. Just a very brief sort of look at that process.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, more of that later when we go through those training slides. Yeah. But yes, in Wales, all significant complaints are referred to the Ombudsman. We have what they call a local resolution protocol, but that's only to deal with very minor, what the Ombudsman calls low-level complaints, by one councillor against another councillor, or maybe an officer against a councillor, where it's largely about a relationship issue, where there's been maybe a lack of respect or consideration. It's the sort of thing. It's like a local mediation process, if you like, where they try and encourage the complainant and the other person just to settle their differences amicably, if you like, by way of an apology and so on. If they can't, then there's a mechanism where we can bring it to Standards Committee. But because it's a low-level complaint where the Ombudsman hasn't got involved, the most Standards Committee could do would be to censure the member for any perceived sort of minor breaches of the code and lack of respect or consideration for others. But it's something that we only use where it's a complaint from another councillor or a council officer. So any complaint involving a member of the public has to go to the Ombudsman.
Right.
And similarly, anything that is more serious in terms of breaches of the code, any significant impropriety there, again, those complaints have to go to the Ombudsman. It's a different regime than what they have in England, but in Wales we've always had investigations by the Ombudsman. In theory, he can start an investigation and refer it back to me as the monitoring officer to complete that investigation and report to Standards Committee. In reality, in Wales, he never does that. If the Ombudsman thinks it's serious enough to merit an investigation, he will interview the witnesses and the complainants, and he will produce a report on that for consideration by the Standards Committee. But in relation to these complaints that have gone to the Ombudsman, where he's turned them down, his guidance explains that when he considers these complaints, there's a 2-stage test that he applies. I mean, the first test obviously is there any breach of the member code of conduct? If there's no breach, then clearly there's no case to answer. So it falls at the first hurdle. But a bit like the case with Bishton, even where he thinks there has been a breach of the code, the second stage of his test then is the public interest test, where he decides whether it's in the public interest to actually investigate and produce a report. And clearly in that case, he decided that it wasn't serious enough to warrant that. Now, I have to say, as a general comment, there is a view amongst standards committees in Wales, and it's been expressed at some of those national conferences that Tracy's attended, that second stage really goes beyond the remit of the. I think the feeling of standards committees is if there's a breach there, they should decide how serious it is and whether there's any sanction should be imposed. So there's a little bit of disquiet, shall I say, about the Ombudsman almost taking that decision out of standards committees' hands. So that may come up as part of the ongoing review now of the code of conduct that's being undertaken prior to the next elections. But it's something that standards committees have referred to on a number of occasions when Welsh Government have been looking to revise the code. They think it's all very well the Ombudsman having investigatory powers, but the final decision should rest with either the Standards Committee or, as we'll see later, the adjudication panel for Wales for more serious cases.
So Gareth, is that two-stage test actually in the legislation?
No, it's not. It's something that the Ombudsman has imposed.
Right.
And again, it's
so
in
it's
his
a bit of a
guidance.
grey area by the sound of it.
Well,
Gareth,
yeah, the
you
Ombudsman
know,
has got wide discretion in terms of how he carries out the role. And as part of that, he can issue statutory guidance, both to community councils and primary authorities, which he has done. And this is set out in his statutory guidance. So, yeah, it is a grey area. Even though the legislation itself gives him wide powers, the imposition of sanctions is a matter for standards committees and adjudication panels. So, the feeling is that he should not be filtering those cases. If he thinks there's a case to answer, it should be left to standards committee to decide if it's serious enough to warrant a sanction. But yeah, you're quite right. It is a sort of grey area in terms of whether he's exceeding his jurisdiction in terms of not allowing those complaints to go forward. Sorry, John.
Yeah,
John.
We were, as a community council, we were quite disappointed and couldn't believe that the Ombudsman said there'd been a breach of the Code 10, and yet he was going to do nothing about it. He suggested that if the councillor concerned wasn't satisfied with it, when in the centre of the letter, that he would then refer it to the MO, which is yourself, sort of thing. So, it sort of makes sense why we're not getting any cases to hear on the standards committee if there's been a clear breach and then the ombudsman decides I'm not going to do anything about it.
Yeah, his reasons for that were that it wasn't serious enough. The failure to declare was a technical breach, but because there's been no actual advantage or impropriety, he didn't think it was serious enough. When he said refer it to me, I think it was more a training issue. The members should go on refresher training in terms of when they should and shouldn't declare interests and how you register those interests. So I think it was more a technical referral rather than anything in terms of censure, because there's nothing that we can do.
Yeah, I mean, it quite clearly states that if your wife or you were a member of another of an organisation that's applying for money, no matter how small it is, really, because this can go on 4 or 5 times a year, that you should declare an interest, and that was our problem. We want to be transparent and answerable to the public. And when this breach, clearly occurred, and then he's doing nothing about it.
I think the one good thing, Chair, is that at least the Ombudsman acknowledged in the letter that there was a breach.
Yeah. Definitely.
So and he acknowledged that the community council were right to complain. So I think if something does come out of it, it's confirmation that what you understood to be the position, namely that councillor should have declared for the record that his wife was on that committee. At least that's been acknowledged now and formalised, and the councillor concerned has been advised of that. So I think some good has come of it. It's a moot point whether, as you say, having found there was a breach, he should have referred it to this standards committee to take a view on what action was appropriate.
Yeah, that's fair enough, Gareth. But the councillor at the meeting was asked if he would declare an interest because his wife was chairman of the committee, and he's also a member. And he refused to do so. So that's why he was reported to the standards committee. And as far as I can see, that was blatant defiance, not to declare an interest.
I don't want to second guess anything on that side of it, but obviously, he has his reasons for that. I understand what you're saying, John, but its due process has been followed. So I think we are where we are with it from that side of it. Paul, you've got I could just see it.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I obviously don't want to comment on the sort of individual elements of the case, but two things. I mean, declaration of interest, to my mind, is an absolutely basic element of good governance. If you're not doing anything else, that should be one of the key elements. And so I echo what John says, and I echo also what Gareth says about, it's gone through due process, and at least it is highlighted that issue. Maybe there's an issue there about, as a standards committee, whether we should be doing a reminder to community councils about obligations under declarations of interest, because to me that's the absolute basic cornerstone of good governance.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, for that one. Gareth, can we get something drafted to them as a reminder?
I'm sure we can send something around to the community council clerks. I have to say, in terms of training, I have liaison meetings on a quarterly basis with the community councils. We hadn't met for a while until we had the last remote meeting, but going back a year or so, one of the things that the clerks did ask for more training on was how and when these declarations of interest should be recorded.
Yeah.
So it might be that rather than just send them a bland letter, that we can actually write an offer the clerks refresher training,
definitely,
or any guidance on when that should be done. I mean, the code is quite clear, and the councillor should have been quite clear. I think there was an issue about whether he was wrong to participate, because as I'll touch on in the training later, there are certain exemptions, particularly for community councils and with small grants, where, having declared the interest for the sake of transparency, you can still participate. So I don't know whether that was a factor in the Ombudsman decision about the seriousness of the breach, and the fact that all the other councillors voted in favour of the grant anyway, so it didn't taint that decision in terms of any bias, if you like, or undue influence. But I'm sure we can draft something and get something circulated to the clerks about this issue.
Yes.
And remind them of the need for vigilance in terms of declarations.
Thank you, Gareth. Richard?
Yeah, just a question for Gareth, really. Sorry, Gareth, I think you might have said earlier, well, I think you mentioned that the legislation is going to be reviewed. Do we know the timescale for that?
Right, not the legislation, but the guidance and the code of conduct that sits behind it.
Right.
Again, we'll touch on this in the training. The code of conduct in Wales is something that was prescribed by Welsh government, because that's devolved.
Right.
Now, the original code goes back over 20 years, and it was updated, I think, last back in about 2016. And what the Welsh Local Government Association have done now, and Welsh Government jointly, is commission. Well, Richard Penn, he's a member of the remuneration panel for Wales. They've commissioned him to undertake a review of the code of conduct, and he's consulting with monitoring officer groups to see if there are any changes or revisions that we would recommend to the code. The idea is that would be completed before the next elections in May 2022, and the guidance would be issued then by the Ombudsman on the back of the revised code of conduct. So yes, we're waiting to see the training that we do for members. The induction training might need to be tweaked slightly if there are any sort of significant changes to the code. But I think the general feeling is that it works. The Welsh code has worked reasonably well. They might want to supplement it with a bit more detail on some of the more general elements of the code. But I don't think we would be looking for whole-scale changes in Wales, because it seems to work reasonably well.
Apologies there. I just needed to pull my blinds before I get roasted in the in the dining room. For a little, at least, very least, a little guidance.
So before we move on from complaints, Chair, there is another matter that I need to raise.
Okay.
And it follows on from the one outstanding complaint that we had against a city council last time. Now, I have to report that in the last day, I have received a formal investigation report from the Ombudsman. So he has accepted this complaint for investigation. He's completed a formal investigation. And he has come to a conclusion that it should be referred to you as a standards committee. It arrived too late to go out with this particular agenda. So what I've asked Pam to do is to contact you all. I will need to arrange a special meeting of the committee in the next sort of 7 to 10 days. It's a two-stage process from here. The first meeting, you need to decide really whether there's a case to answer and whether you want to conduct a full hearing into this matter. I can't give you any details at this stage because it has to be strictly confidential. The Ombudsman is clear that unless and until you've concluded any hearing and come to any decision or determination, that we have to keep this strictly confidential. So what I will try and get Pam and Samantha to do is liaise with you all to try and fix another date for a meeting, like I said, in the next 7 to 10 days. It will send out the agenda, and it will be a Part 2 confidential report. I will send you all a copy of the Ombudsman's Section 69 report, which sets out the detail of the complaint, the investigation, his findings of fact, and why he thinks there's been a breach of the code of conduct. Then at the next meeting, again in private session, I will invite you to sort of exclude the press and public because of that confidentiality. You will need to come to a decision whether there's a case to answer, and if so, whether you think you want to hold a full hearing and invite the member and the investigating officer from the Ombudsman's office to attend that hearing to give evidence so that you can come to a decision then about whether there has been misconduct, and if so, whether you want to impose any sanctions. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that, Gareth. Yeah, so we'll wait to hear from either Pam or Sam in the next couple of days.
Yeah, so that'll be the first meeting.
Right.
Should you decide there's a case to answer, then within a further sort of 28 days or so, we will need to arrange a hearing. Now, that I think will take longer. So again, I don't want to predetermine what happens next time. Obviously, you need to decide there's a case to answer first. But if there was, then we would need to get you together probably for a longer period, and probably an earlier start, I'm afraid, to conduct a full hearing. And probably because none of you have done any of those hearings before, it would be good to circulate the procedure beforehand and maybe run through that as a training exercise.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Gareth. Can I assume then that the first sort of meeting we could do as this sort of time, if you don't think, and then obviously the second part of the meeting, if there is a case to answer, we'll need to move back into the working day time more.
Yeah, I think that would be entirely appropriate, Chair. Like I said, Pam and Samantha will circulate the report beforehand. Only to yourselves, only to members of Standards Committee, because it's confidential. And yeah, I would ask you all to maintain the confidentiality and sensitivity of that document for the time being. But we'll send you the report so you can read it beforehand. So having read it beforehand, it should be a relatively quick meeting for you to decide whether there's a case to answer and whether you want to conduct a full hearing.
Lovely.
So I think we can meet at this time. That's not a problem. Again, it'll be in camera, so we won't even record this Teams meeting because it'll be private and confidential.
Yeah.
But that should be a relatively quick meeting. Yes.
Thank you, Gareth. Just before we move on, John, I did mention after Gareth's statement, and we could probably do some training or at least a bit of an update paper-wise for the community council clerks. Are you content with that?
Yes, community council clerks, and community council members, if they,
Okay, that's fine.
if they, if they could attend. I know we've got several new members and existing members because I think we've all got have to complete certain training by next year or the year after. We'd be pleased, as councillors and the clerk to attend any training that's offered.
Thank you, John. Good job for that one. On the matters of complaints, do you have any more, Gareth, or can we move on?
I think that's enough for going on this one.
Gosh, all this stuff in one go. Okay, thank you for that. The next item is item 7 on the agenda, which is AOB. I've not been advised of any AOB prior to the start of the meeting. So we'll just move on then to confirm the date and the time of the next meeting. Now, obviously, the date and time of the next meeting of this committee, as a normal committee meeting, we've got down as the 11th of November 2021 at 5:30 p.m. But in reality, the next meeting will be a one in the middle of that. So our next, if you like, scheduled meeting will be the 11th of November 21 at 5:30 p.m. Okay. On that note, then I'm going to close the Standards Committee meeting now. Via Pam, Gareth has asked, if